And a very happy Wednesday to you at 12:08 in the West. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, yesterday, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass took to the streets of downtown Los Angeles for an impromptu press conference about 2,000 of the National Guard being recalled from their duty in Los Angeles. And, John, what do you think happened when Karen Bass started talking?
Siren.
Well, you know what? I am hoping that this is the beginning of a complete withdrawal of all National Guard troops and of all Marines.
Sounds like you might need them.
Every time they have a press conference to say things are under control, it sounds like that. And usually she rhymes, too.
Well, that usually is her move, but she hasn't done it nearly as much as we like.
If you're feeling down, if you're feeling blue, let's get help for you.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Well, the top story nationwide centers around Jeffrey Epstein, the man who was found dead at a federal prison in the state of New York after being convicted on a multitude of crimes, including crimes against children. We know the theories and the rumors as to just exactly what was going on in Jeffrey Epstein's multiple properties in New York, in New Mexico, in the Virgin Islands, and abroad, and what bold-faced names were taking part in the crimes against children at those properties. President Trump ran on the platform of releasing the Epstein list and shedding light on all of those details, telling us what the government knows and certainly not hiding any of the details. Well, now he's saying that that likely will not happen because it's not as most people think, or certainly as the people who are invested in that story think, and it's time to just move on from the Jeffrey Epstein situation. And I've got to tell you, as someone who was initially quite interested in that story, certainly when he was arrested, I paid attention to all of those details.
You used to get notes. Hey, stop talking about Epstein so much.
Yes, we did when Jillian and I were together. It was too salacious for people when they were eating their Cheerios. And then during the trial, some of the details came out. However, it was mostly a hush-hush situation. Same thing with Ghislaine Maxwell. And we thought, okay, well, once they go to prison and the Democrats lose, the details will come out. Then he dies in prison. And we thought, okay, just when you think the story can't take another turn, here we are. And now Jeffrey Epstein is back in the news for all of the reasons I just mentioned. And I've got to tell you, as someone who was interested in the story and then kind of lost interest after it stopped being in the news, my opinion on this matter has evolved a bit over time. And it evolved most dramatically when I went on vacation earlier this year. As you know, I am a great big fan of cruise ships. I love to go on cruises, and I don't even particularly care where I go. As long as you put me on that cruise ship and I am 2 floors away from a casino, and I am 10 feet away from a bar, I am a happy camper. And one of the things that happens when you cruise a lot is you go to a lot of those Caribbean islands. In fact, I have long thought that if you're a political science student, doing a semester at sea would be a great thing to do in the Caribbean because so many different countries colonize so many different islands. You really get an opportunity to see how different governmental systems work. But on this last one, the cruise went to the Virgin Islands, which is part of the United States of America. They're territories, not states, but your cell phone works, your health insurance works to the extent that they have hospitals there, and they speak the language. And when I was in St. Thomas, I decided I was going to do some parasailing because why not? It's a fun way to see an island without having to do much physically, and you can always sign me up for that. So I was on the boat and was preparing to do the parasailing, and they have to give you the safety briefing, and they have to tell you what to expect, what to do, what not to do. And one of the things that they told me as they were going through this is, you're going to have a bird's eye view of Little St. James. And I go, oh, that's interesting. Meant nothing to me at the time. And they go, otherwise known as Jeffrey Epstein's Island. I said, you got to be kidding me. And they said, no, you'll be able to see everything on Jeffrey Epstein's Island. Well, everything that you can see from the sky. And I thought, should I take my cell phone up there and risk dropping it in the ocean to take some pictures of Jeffrey Epstein's Island? Maybe do a selfie with Jeffrey Epstein's Island in the background? But I'm too reliant on my phone to be that vain. So I left it in the boat. And as I was talking to these people about Jeffrey Epstein's Island, things started getting more interesting. Because when you talk to people who are expats who live in foreign countries that the cruise ships go to, you learn very quickly, if you find a white guy living in Belize, they're probably wanted for something back home. So you learn to keep your distance. But when you're dealing with the Virgin Islands, you're dealing with another portion of the United States. So it's a different type of person that moves from the mainland there. In this particular case, and what you learn in the Virgin Islands, is that it's a lot of gorgeous recent college grads who are trying to find themselves. A lot of really attractive people, blonde girls with nose rings, guys without an ounce of fat on their body, and they have degrees in useless things from schools in the Pacific Northwest or the Middle West, and they don't know what to do, and they decide, let's move to the Virgin Islands and be scuba instructors. And they meet someone who looks exactly like them, and they have a grand old time living at the beach where they live in a place where you can hear the ocean waves at night. There's not much in terms of traffic. There's not much in terms of corporate life. They're not living the life of the man in the gray flannel suit. It's a very Jimmy Buffett existence. But on these islands, there aren't very many people. And if you think the labor supply is short here, go to St. Thomas or St. Croix or St. John's and try to find someone to do something for you. There aren't that many people. So if you're one of these people, these recent college grads from the mainland, you have to be a jack of all trades, and it can be expensive to live there because it's an island. Everything they have there is brought to them. So you want to buy gasoline, you want to buy bottled water, you want to buy meat, you want to buy whatever. It's expensive down there because it's an island. So they have to work 2 or 3 jobs to make it work. So you're a parasailing instructor, fine. Then you also work as a bartender, and then you work for private parties, whatever. And they all told me that they would work at Jeffrey Epstein's Island as one of their side jobs. Now, as I mentioned before, these people were very young, and young people know nothing about popular culture. You bring a famous politician that all of us in this audience would recognize immediately, doesn't register to them. You bring a person who used to be on the Today Show 10 years ago, they don't know who they are. Certainly people with PhDs, no clue. Former athletes, don't know, don't care. So they're the perfect person to employ at your house because they have no intellectual curiosity as to who these people are. They don't recognize any of these people, and they're just happy to get a paycheck so they can pay their rent. So fine. These are the people who serve drinks at Jeffrey Epstein's Island. These are the people who serve food at Jeffrey Epstein's Island. These are the people who do all of the jobs that you need done, particularly if you want to hire attractive people to do it. And I never told them what I did for a living. I was just a guy who was there to parasail, and they didn't particularly think that they were spilling the beans on anything that important because they're not paying attention to the news cycle at all. So I said, so what was life like over there? What was it like to work there? And they said that he was definitely creepy, but it was always an odd situation. It was always strange over there when they would work his parties. And I said, well, strange in what way? They did mention there were some young people over there. That certainly came up in the conversation. But what struck me more than anything was their description of what life was like at those dinner parties that he would throw. When he would have what I assume were the politicians and the PhDs and all of the people that we know he's associated with that wouldn't register to younger people. And they said that this guy would sit there at these dinner parties in silence and swirl wine around in a glass for a very long time as everyone would sit there, all of these dignitaries, and just stare at him, waiting for him to speak. And after he swirled the wine around in his glass for a very long time, he would start the conversation. And the question that they said that they heard at one of the parties, which they said most of the questions were similar to this, and I'm not kidding, and I'm not making this up, here is the question that he asked. What is up? Not what is up like I haven't seen you in a long time and hey, what's up? No, what is up? As in not down. As in the sky. And they would bat that around for hours and hours and hours. And you'd have these people with PhDs in physics and these politicians and these famous people would sit there and have a conversation. What is the definition of up? I cannot imagine having to sit through that. If I was there and he asked me what is up, I would say, Rosie O'Donnell's cholesterol. Next question. But they would play in the sandbox, and it would go on forever. And as they described this to me, I thought, I couldn't take that. Could you take that, Randy?
It's pretty wild.
If you sat through 3 hours of a discussion of what is up, you deserve a massage from a 17-year-old. And every dinner party, they said, was like that. And I thought to myself, okay, well, you have these blowhards who are there who love to hear themselves talk, and they think that this is some kind of pseudo-intellectual conversation where it has to be, if not truly stupid people thinking they're smart, it has to be smart people who are being duped by a truly stupid person into having a truly idiotic conversation. And I thought to myself, I've heard of this before. I know this script. I know this. Where have I heard about totally ridiculous situations like this before? And then it occurred to me. I have a good friend who is a movie writer. He writes movies about crime, but not crime like, I don't know, the Boston Strangler or Richard Ramirez. Crime like farcical crime. His name is Dale Launer. He wrote Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, a movie you've probably heard of, Ruthless People, My Cousin Vinny, many of the classics. And we will frequently go out to dinner, and he'll tell me about whatever current project he's working on. And it is essentially some variation of the same thing. Some flim-flam artist, some con man who has some scheme, and hilarity ensues. His movies have similar arcs in that respect. And I'm not denigrating the man's work. The man's work is phenomenal. It's fantastic. I don't think anyone's been able to put together anything better in that particular genre. But the movies are similar in that sense. They're about people who are criminals, but lovable criminals, let's say. And I thought, as I put it in the context of Dale's dinners, what could be the case here is that this guy was one great big con artist, where he would be able to weasel his way into the social network of one wealthy person or important person, and then through that meet other wealthy or important people, and then just start collecting them like they're cereal toys. And then lo and behold, you have someone who is basically a con artist who has been able to con his way through smoke and mirrors into the social networks of the people who really are movers and shakers. Because if you think about it, the easiest people to con, if you're in one of these networks, is someone who's rich or famous. My dinner buddy for a very long time in the desert was Suzanne Summers. And I always like to eat at the bars. I like talking to people. I like talking to the bartenders. I like being very close to the booze. And she would tell me all the time how envious she was of my ability to eat dinner at the bar, because she can't do that. People would want selfies. People would want her autograph. People would want to talk to her, and it wouldn't be fun. It would be a work experience. So how did Suzanne meet people? She met people through the social networks of other people she knew. Well, a lot of the people she knows are rich or famous too. So they bring people in, she meets them, then they become part of her network. And for those who are good at putting themselves in the networks of rich or famous people, there were people who were clearly working some angle who would find a way to get in her orbit. And I could identify him from a mile away. She couldn't, though, because this person was a friend of someone that she respected, and they vouched for them. And if you're rich and you're famous, that's how you meet people. You can't meet them at the bar. You can't meet them on the cruise ship. That's how you meet them. And when I put this all together, from the information I found out in the Virgin Islands and the information that I learned from Dale, I think it's possible that this guy was the social version of Bernie Madoff. This guy was a con man. This guy was a flim-flam artist. And this guy used smoke and mirrors to fool every rich and famous person in his orbit. What say you? At 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you want to listen to yesterday's program or maybe even Monday's and you missed it, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts. That could be the Apple Podcasts app, could be iHeartRadio, could be Spotify, almost anywhere that you get a podcast. If you search for The John Phillips Show, you'll find a way to hit subscribe and download all the episodes. Something that's even easier, and it's the trendiest platform for podcasts. Do what George Gascon does to himself in the middle of the night.
Do a Google on YouTube.
If you search for The John Phillips Show on YouTube, you will see all the episodes right there. You can like, you can subscribe, you can share. It's so easy to share YouTube videos with your friends. I know. I do it all the time. You can also get one of our apps. You can get the free KABC app. You can get the free KSFO app. That is another incredibly easy way to listen live to our radio stations and download all of our podcasts. And let me tell you, the great thing about a podcast, you can listen to these things no matter what you're doing. Like, let's say you happen to be on Cap Street in San Francisco and you're listening to these podcasts while you're cruising for you know what.
There's a lot of prostitution, a lot of crimes.
Speaking of which, I threw out the call for calls on Jeffrey Epstein. And even though this story is the number one story on social media today, and the number one story on cable news today, and even on network news today, we got exactly one call on the subject.
Now it's two.
If we throw out a topic on Gavin Newsom or Karen Bass or George Gascon or fill in the blank, Shang Tao, all of our lines are full instantly. If we do a giveaway for concert tickets, every single line is full instantly. I throw out the phone number and a question about Jeffrey Epstein, and we get one call. I wonder if the public has just moved on and they don't care.
Well, there are certain stories that seem appealing because that's what the talking heads are talking about. That's what is being discussed all over social media. When you see the clip-grabbing websites, that it seems is what the discussion of the day is, but this doesn't do anything compared to when we took calls on illegal dumping just 2 days ago. Because that's a real issue that affects real people.
The email is usually an avalanche. I'm looking at the email. We've gotten 4 since the show started today.
I think we have just learned the difference between stories that you believe are what everyone's talking about as opposed to what everyone's actually talking about.
And if he's just a dead con man, then who cares? All right, let's go to Jeff at Encino. Jeff, hello.
Yeah, Dan, I think you just answered your own question. Yeah, he was a con man. Also, water is wet and Liberace was gay. But
Wait, Liberace was gay?
Yeah, everyone's known this for years. So maybe I'm the only person who thought it was important to find out. Yeah, I've known this for years. Since people were talking about this years and years ago. I thought it was assumed he was a con man when people started learning his name.
Thank you for the call, sir.
Now the calls are coming in.
All right, let's go to Mike in L.A. Mike, hello.
Hello, how you guys doing today?
Good.
Good, yeah, I guess my comment would be, or my question would be like, if he is a con man, does that take away from the fact that him and his buddies diddled kids? And, I mean, like, I don't see the difference here if he's a con man or intentionally did it. They diddled kids, they wanted to diddle kids, to use him as a medium to diddle kids.
No, I think that he was definitely doing that. In fact, he was convicted of it, and criminals are
and
criminals.
Now you're just saying that, hey, since he was a con man, let's go ahead and just push it on their table.
No. That's not what I'm saying.
With it, right? And that's what it kind of feels like.
No. Let me be clear. The competing theory is that he was working for the CIA or the Mossad or British intelligence or something along those lines. And what I said, what's that?
I don't see the difference once again. Like, Mossad, whatever, yada, yada, yada. All the more reason to pursue the son of a dog. And to find the people he's working with, the rich people that are diddling kids out there, you know? That's what needs to be answered. If everybody's looking at what is he doing it for? That's what he was doing it for.
Can't say that.
Let's find out who he was doing it with. Yeah. You got me. Oh,
all right.
Am I done? I won't do it anymore.
Thank you for the call, sir. I appreciate it. Can't use that word.
Love to use it. Gavin Newsom uses it, but we can't use it here.
Red Fox used to like it a lot.
We like it during the commercial breaks.
Yes. Okay. So that caller brought up an interesting point, and I want to go back and I want to clarify. I do believe this guy was doing bad things to kids, and I do believe that people in his orbit were doing bad things to kids, and I don't think that's in question right now. I mean, he was convicted of doing that. Ghislaine Maxwell is sitting in prison for doing that. I don't think that that is something that is a topic that hasn't been explored. What is an interesting angle, or the angle I think that keeps this in the press, was he doing this to entrap people for intelligence for other purposes? That's part of the story. That's part of what I think people want to pursue. And what I'm saying is, I think this guy was just a con man who wanted to be around rich and famous people, and he would do bad things with rich and famous people. And I don't think there's any question about that. But I think the motivation was, you have a guy who was not wealthy, who was not born into the moneyed class, who was able to use smoke and mirrors to con his way into that moneyed class. And he used fancy buildings and islands and planes and sex and all of these different tools to keep these people around once he made it into their orbit. That's what I think was going on here. I think this was more akin to a dirty, rotten scoundrels or ruthless people or one of those types of flim-flam artists, as opposed to someone who was working for a government.
And there was kid diddling.
We know that there was kid diddling. That part we know about. And Randy, I don't know if you put out the bat signal or what, but suddenly the phones blew up. So let's go to the phones now at 800-222-5222 and begin with Ken in Studio City. Ken, hello.
Hi, John, Randy. I think it's kind of self-incriminating that your audience wasn't calling when the subject of Jeffrey Epstein's island came up. Maybe Trump has been protecting your audience. Present caller excluded. The other thing I want to tell you is, yes, you're right, that Epstein was a slime ball con man, but he was the most powerful of the people in the world, because he had the movers and shakers, the millionaires, the powerful politicians, all eating out of his hand for the strongest drug in human history, which is sex with young girls. And so that his philosophizing that you were talking about that you couldn't sit through, everybody there at his parties was probably rolling their eyes and listening to him for hours just to get a piece of young you-know-what. And he was probably laughing with Ghislaine privately about how he was making these people listen to all of this BS. So those are my thoughts.
All right. Well, thank you for pronouncing her name in a way that we didn't have to bleep, which isn't always the case. Let's go to Tom in San Bruno. Tom, hello.
Thanks for taking my call. I've been following this story from the beginning. The thing I don't like is the fact that they put out information, whether he did or did not commit suicide, or information hit right on my desk, and then all of a sudden I don't have Dan Bondi and so on. And then they have to roll it back. And it starts to look like it's a cover-up. To me,
Okay, sir, you're cutting out. Your cell phone's going in and out, but I think I get the gist of your point, which is they promised us a lot, and now it looks like they are unable to deliver. I can tell you this as someone who's worked in broadcasting virtually my entire adult life. One thing that I have noticed is whenever someone promises you a big reveal, it usually turns out to be nothing. Think about Geraldo Rivera with Al Capone's vault. Think about Rachel Maddow saying, I have Trump's tax returns, and all you have to do is tune in tonight at 6, and I will produce the tax returns. The way things typically work in government and the way things typically work in broadcasting is this. If you have a piece of information that is regarded as breaking news or earth-shattering news or whatever, you get it out as fast as possible. Because if you sit on it, someone will jump you and someone will beat you to the punch. When there's big breaking news, it's usually involving a breaking news banner and this just in and this is what we have. That's the way it works. If you promise a big reveal, it means you probably don't have much, but you want to use it as a tool to get people to tune in on a certain day or at a certain time. And then you try to use smoke and mirrors to make it seem bigger than it actually is. And I think that if they committed a sin, if Pam Bondi and others, it was overpromising something that they knew that they didn't have, or they didn't have what they were saying that they had, or to the extent that they claimed to have had. I think that that would certainly be a sin that they would have committed if that's the case. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Tom in San Jose. Tom, hello.
Hey, John. Thanks for taking my call. Once again, you've got your finger on the pulse, you and your partner there. You nailed it. Everybody's tired of this. They know that they're not going to be held accountable. So everybody's just like, all right, we'll wait for the Save California hour. And then you said, look, man, nobody called. I thought this was important. So everyone's like, oh, God, fine. It's important. I do want to talk about it. I did the same exact thing. I'm listening to you. I'm so grateful for you. It's like you and I grew up on the same line, and I got law enforcement training and stuff, and people listen to this man when he's telling you about this. They don't have to be right. They just have to be first. And I'm tired of that. I deal with, just the facts, ma'am. And I hate this stuff, but these people aren't going to be held accountable. There's some very powerful people that he got caught up in this, in the way that he said that he was able to do it. He's just a little dirtbag. And if there's so many things involved in this, I don't have enough time to explain it, but it's like everybody's like, well, I'm glad he's dead. So you know what? Again, all these different avenues of people going, let's just move on kind of a thing. But when I have somebody that I rely on who's got major law enforcement background, who is also on the radio, who says, this stinks 6 ways from Sundays, I'm like, okay, so this guy gets it. All the cameras were off. The guards fell asleep. I had a flat tire. I didn't have cab fare. It's obvious what happened. but nothing's going to happen. There's some powerful people, everybody, and you wouldn't want to mess with them either. And even this individual that I will not name names, because I've done this before too, so I understand hopefully I understand the respective radio, and I don't have to get bleeped. They were right, and it's no different than the bomb that was left outside of the DNC place. It needs to be investigated, but it's not going to, because they're going to move on. And there's different reasons why, but one of the main reasons here is you've got some powerful people that, they're not going to allow anything to get out. And I will say it, like you said, Jill Epstein, that would crack me up. Thank you for not saying how some people say it. Anyway, she might do a deal, everybody. She might do a deal to where she comes out and says, hey, it's not what all of you think. Kind of like what a few other people said. I'm going to tell you, everybody, you're not going to want to hear this, but he did commit suicide. I just threw my arms up like everybody else and said, we can't keep doing this. I got wife, kids, dog, house. I can't keep doing this. Thank you guys for hanging in there, and thank you for helping us out in California too, and just letting people know what's going on. I love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for the call, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for your service. Let's go to Bob in Piedmont. Bob, hello.
Hi. I know another way where you could get into very wealthy people's orbit, and it's not too hard to do in every large city. Like up in the Bay Area, we have the Bohemian Club, and we have the family started by William Randolph Hearst when he wanted to split off from the Bohemian Club. But right now, you can be a member. If you have friends, you can join easily. 15, 20,000 to join, and most of the rich people that are members used to be doctors and lawyers you'd meet, but now it's guys in their 40s that have sold their second startup and computer whizzes. And like I had lunch with his president of IBM and head of PG&E, and so you can join easily there, and you're sitting around casual down at the farm or at the Grove for the Bohemian Club, and everybody would trust you. You're a good guy. You got in there somehow. So. And I know they have those in Miami and New York, so that'd be easily how we could get into an orbit.
All right. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to John in Burbank. John, you have about 30 seconds. Go.
Hey, John, just quick take. Men are pigs. They could have sat around talking about what's up or just read Reader's Digest from cover to cover. They knew they were going to have sex with young girls, and they would have sat there all day if they knew that was going to be the payoff. The second question is, these people, somebody knows who these guys were on that island, and the girls, or I guess mostly minors who were involved, were they all paid off? Are they all in fear of their lives? Why isn't anyone talking?
Yeah, it's that one who's now deceased, Virginia Guffrey, who did a lot of the talking to the different documentaries that were made about it. She talked to some of the journalists, but she's the only one I can identify by name. There may be others who were talking, but she was certainly the most vocal, and she is no longer alive. Strange story. Thank you for the call, sir. I appreciate it.